Well, welcome, my friends, again to 15-minute free thinking with me, Carpo. I'll be your host, I'll be your guest, and I'll be sharing some of my thoughts with you. As pretentious as that may sound, it's a half joke. You have to know my sense of humor. I just finished making a video about our division, the issues that we have as a society, and especially as a nation, personally. But I wanted to creep a little addendum in here, a little addition to that particular video, more having to do with one aspect of what I think I left out, especially to the men, about manhood and about courage and rites of passage, which I did leave out completely. We in the West have lost our sense of what it means to be a man. Now hear me out. Any feminists out there, or any, Gen X, Gen Z people who have been told that, being a man or a woman doesn't matter. We've gotten into gender pronouns and woke culture. I'm not going into the politics of this. I'm just speaking directly to the men, or the young men out there. Many other cultures have rites of passage, which some of them are fascinating. One of my favorite is a particular tribe in the Amazon, I believe, where they weave these leafcutter ants, I believe they are, these huge ants, and they weave them into this tapestry, this fabric, literally weave their heads in, so all of their pinchers are on one side, and then they wrap that on, or put that on the kid's chest, and they get bit by like hundreds of ants all at once. It's pretty fascinating when you think about it. You think, well, this is stupid if you think one way, and another person might think this is great, depending on what you understand about the process. The process is not about the pain. That's part of it. You see, they're building up a tolerance to the poison of this particular ant that lives in their region. There are many other things like this where people are whipped and beaten and tied up, and it may seem extremely primal. And it's not something I would do to my children, obviously. But in the right context, with a culture that has that history, it can be a phenomenal tool to allow young men to transition into adulthood. In the Western world, we're basically thrown out and said, hey, you're on your own now, buddy. You got to figure out what you're going to do in your life. And it's really ridiculous. Actually, I haven't had an opportunity to make a video in my living room in a long time, but I have a family of, there's 5 of us, plus our dog, who's Lucy's sleeping over there. But my wife and my 2 youngest kids went to help our niece with a storage space she bid on and won, and she had to move the stuff out. And my oldest son left to go play with his band, because he plays in a rock band, and also to go to work for a while. And so I had a few moments to sit in here by myself. I thought about the gratitude I have for the family I have. The fact that even when it's noisy and I have to go out to my office to think for a moment, or to escape for a moment and make a video, or sometimes I just sit there and process life. I would miss that if I didn't have it. But I don't want to get off topic here. Family is very important to a lot of men, and kind of a man's self-esteem, just like women as well. But I'm just speaking for the men here. My oldest son, who is 26 now, I feel like I didn't do a good enough job with him, raising him, giving him rites of passage. I took him on hard hikes. We pushed him as much as we could. He wanted to play football. We didn't want him to play football because I didn't want him to hurt his brain. I wanted him to experience the world without harming his mind. And that's very difficult. And he went through his own experiences. He's had his own life. He's a phenomenal kid. I would trust him with anything. In fact, to have a 26-year-old son who I could trust with anything, whether it's a secret or money or just trust that he's not going to hate me. The kid is amazing. I love him to death. But I also know that he's coming into a world that's confusing as hell right now. It's not his fault. He thinks that, he doesn't have any particular career, doesn't know what he wants to do, and I'm like, it's not you, son. This is the world. This is why people become antinatalists, because the world is so complex and confusing. But when we step back and follow what we love, it makes you wonder, how well would that work for society? How many people want to be rock stars? Well, do you need to be a rock star, or do you just need to be known in your own circle? This is important. Everything became commercialized. Imagine if it was regional, Your local musicians, you have your local artists, your local artisans, your craftsmen, your carpenters. There seems to be enough work for everyone, just not enough money to go around, right? And as a man, you're told if you don't bring home the bacon, then you're not a man. This is what we've been fed from day one. And to some extent it's true, but only because somebody has to. Now, a lot more women through the women's lib movement and women's rights, suffrage, women were allowed to finally vote. When you look back on how ridiculously women have been treated through history, you see that women, it's not that they can't work or didn't want to work, it's just that they were oppressed and suppressed. But looking back a different way, you see somebody had to take care of the children, right? Somebody had to take care of the kids. That's just the way it's always been until today when we have daycare. And we live in a complex society. So as a dad, imagine being a stay-at-home dad while your wife works. Is that emasculating, right? Well, I did it for a couple of years, staying home with my kids without working. I would try to work from home, do what I could, but sure, you look down on yourself, but you have to look past that. And the big question is not, it's the bigger question of raising children can be one of the most painful yet rewarding things to do. But to stick to the courage subject here, and to get back to the main point, is it better to stick by your convictions or to be willing to change? This is one of the biggest questions that come up again and again. People are accused of being flip-floppers. There was one guy in Florida, I believe, who was a congressman or senator, somebody within the government. And they said he was called out by the media for being a flip-flopper and by the government because his other constituents and peers, because he was anti-marijuana, heavily anti-marijuana. And then he was educated, and he read a bunch of reports on cannabis and the actual effects, and he came out and said, well, I'm no longer, I am in support of this medical cannabis bill now. And everybody said, look, you changed your mind, And the guy was ridiculed and made to look like a weakling within his circles. This is a huge problem in society. It's just the same thing with whistleblowers. A person works for a company and they speak out against that company because they see something wrong. That is extremely manly thing to do. It's the right thing to do. Yet, they're continuing, and women do it too, of course. Don't get me wrong, and don't make it about, sex here. Men do that, and they're accused of being disgruntled former employees, even when the secrets they're exposing are absolutely true. I have seen too many stories like this, and so my point with that little rant there was being a man means speaking up, and that also means speaking up for the less fortunate. If you see somebody being beaten or abused, that's extremely important to stand up for those people, even if you just tell people, the others who are abusing them, how you feel about that kind of shit. But there's one important factor I want to cover, and these are all my opinions, of course. This is all relative, subjective. Being a man means going with the flow, but knowing when to hold on to the boulder in the current. knowing when to swim to shore and stop and refuse to go further until things are fixed. If you don't like the way that the river goes, you can avoid certain waterfalls by getting out of the water. Let's just say. Going with the flow, I've always used the river metaphor, literally. Sometimes you get caught in an eddy. Sometimes it's faster. Sometimes it's slower current. But you can get out of the water and walk your ass down and get around that. That means it's more work. It's easy to go with the flow, but you can get out of the water and walk down the hill and get around a waterfall that might kill you. You never know what's under that waterfall. And in the same way, you have to know when to stand up for things that are wrong. And when it's going to take a little bit of energy from you to fight that. It might even just be speaking up. Maybe you're not even heard. Maybe it's only 3 people who even hear your message. But if you feel a certain way, don't go with the flow. If the workplace flow means everybody's telling racial jokes or, making fun of somebody who's crippled or something stupid like that. Like, I cannot understand the mentality of certain people. And I won't go along with bullshit and offensive gestures. I don't want to make this longer than 15 minutes. So I'd just like to say, when it comes to being a man, a lot of guys have asked me, what's the most influential book that you've ever read? Or can you give me a list of books? And I really wanted to end with a list of books that I could share. But honestly, I couldn't find a single one that I have on my bookshelf that it was that influential to me. And then I thought it's probably because the ones that I have, I've given away. I've loaned out. I can't even remember the names of them. My psychedelic books, things like The Psychedelic Experience by Ralph Metzner and Timothy Leary, which was one of my first books I read about set and setting for psychedelics, which set me on this experience of having psychedelic journeys where I was really gaining some major insights about existence and life. And this is when I parted from this idea of being a kid, but at the same time not escaping from my child mind. It was a melding, this reality that I have to grow up, I have to be part of society, but at the same time I don't have to live by other people's standards. And it's hard, but everybody's just trying to hang on by a thread. A lot of people, they just do what they have to do to survive without ever looking for more. We're all looking for our truth. But when it comes to books, they can be some of the most rewarding things that experiences we have. I would say read any book you can pertaining to subjects that interest you. But I do have one book right here that I wanted to share. It's called Hallucinations by Oliver Sacks. Now, it's not that big of a book. The one I have is a larger print, so I just bought it used. But it has a little Arrowhead tag in here about psychedelics. It's one of the places I contribute to. This was about perceptions and how we perceive the world. And let me tell you, the reality that we think we know is not necessarily the reality that is out there. And I think anyone who's looked and understood how, not quantum physics or anything as extreme as that, but just basic atomic structure, the fact that, let me just say, perhaps that just reminded me of one of the most influential books I ever read, which was Chemistry, or All About Chemistry. Now look, back in the 1950s, these books came out called the All About series. And I think you might get them at like the grocery store or something. They used to have all these promotions. My parents got them and then passed them on to me. I only had one that was the one that I had in my room. It was All About Chemistry. And I remember reading that book and it saying that atoms are actually almost all empty space. Or as far as I know now, they are empty space. That's all they are. I mean, you could break it down to particles, which are probably reduced further to energy. It's fascinating. And there was this one chemical in there that they talked about called phlogiston, which Phlogiston, I believe. And it was what people used to believe that created fire. They thought anything that burns must contain a compound. Because to them it was like a fuel, right? Just like, it must be phlogiston. There's something in there. Not realizing it was just burning carbon. So I guess the carbon was basically phlogiston, but there can be accelerants. I'm no expert on these things, but I just like to say that that book gave me the perspective that everything was empty space. And years later I read one that I do have on the shelf up there, and it's called The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot. Now, he passed away, I think, in 2002 or 4 or something. I don't know. But crazy book with a lot of weird theories. I haven't read it in a long time. I need to reread it for the sake of probably disputing some of the things that I remember from it. But it did teach me that everything's energy. These are important lessons. I know this sounds far away from what it means to be a man, right? Start out with what's it about to be a man and what's courage. To understand the deeper implications of things, that everything is made of matter. We don't quite understand how it coalesces or why. Well, we understand these basically, the atomic force, the nuclear force, weak and strong nuclear forces, and we pretend to put labels on these things. But whether you're a physicist, an atheist, a Christian, any religion or any anti-religion, any belief system, we've all sat back by ourselves at one time in our lives and said, regardless of what I believe or think I believe, holy shit, this world is fucking weird. My speakers are made of several materials, even how records vibrate, transmit that through the wires into the speakers. Sure, you can understand the basics of things, and then you think, what about transistors? And how does this information in computer chips really work? And God, there's people a lot fucking smarter than I am. And then you start to wonder, where's my big contribution? Holy shit, people are geniuses, and I'm just living a mundane life in this world. But you're not. They just say some of the most intelligent people in the world cannot interact or party for shit. I'm not talking about partying. I'm like, woohoo, but rather, there's certain skills, let's say, that we each have that we bring to the table, and we have to find what that skill is. I'm not going to say that this next book, the only other one I brought, was the most influential, but I would say that this book was probably one of the most interesting books ever. It's The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. And this book is absolutely crazy. I mean, some of the stories and ideas in here seem absurd. There's some really good pictures in the center that, are illustrations of basically it's a very thick book as well, like 800 or 900 pages, but Manly P. Hall was a Freemason, a Master Mason, honorary, maybe he was a 33rd degree Mason, but it doesn't matter to me. Freemasonry is not a mystery to me. I researched it years ago. I went through a major conspiracy phase where I was posting things like the Freemasons are causing all these problems. I used to post stuff like that, like 10 years ago or 11 years ago. And then my YouTube channel, I started talking about occult knowledge, got deeper into it. I started learning a little more of the truth. And then I realized I just wanted to find a mystery in the world, or somebody else who was causing the big problems, And I think that that's the biggest one I want to share, is that Manly P. Hall told me what it was to be a man at that time in my life, and taught me that it's okay to have explore all different types of knowledge. You don't have to have a religion, but you don't have to hate religion. You can have your own kind of spiritual understanding. And because of that, I was able to just realize that, there really is a deeper meaning to the universe, but you don't have to define it. Call it God, whatever you choose, but it's much more complicated than we can put in a book, right? But the thing is, Manly P. Hall has all of his talks and speeches. About 10 years ago, I was really into downloading torrent files of I was like, at this point in my life, while I can get them, I'm going to download all the music I can. Basically, like, discographies of all my favorite bands in high quality format. And because I was like, one day I won't be doing this anymore. They'll shut these sites down. And torrent files were basically just file sharing sites that were a little more controversial. But I got a lot of music, and then I thought, well, I want to get some philosophy. And that's when I found all my Alan Watts lectures, my Manly P. Hall lectures, as well as something called the Great Courses series, which for about a year working on my job site, I used to just wear my headphones because I could do my own thing most of the time. And I would just listen to one of those three. I'd listen to people talk basically all day long, but philosophers talk for 10 hours a day, then in my car on the way there and back. In that time, I learned a lot of shit. I'm not going to be arrogant about it and say, oh yeah, I'm super educated and I know everything about philosophy. I forgot a lot about it. A lot of the philosophers they covered, everyone, from Nietzsche down to, just listening to Alan Watts in general, they all have their own opinions on life and what matters in life. I never believed one of them completely. I never took one person's opinion. In fact, I've never listened to one philosopher or met one person who I agreed with all of their points. It's very, very rare, if non-existent. We're always going to have a weird disconnect from a certain idea. And this is something that should be cherished and celebrated as a man or a woman. To be able to look at all ideas without hate, without malice. The only time I believe that a rebuttal or malice is warranted towards a belief system or an idea is when that idea either harms individuals or whole groups or nature, the environment, things like this. A person might be saying we're minding our own business, but that business is harming others. That's important to address, I think, as a society. Well, this video's ended up being a lot longer, or audio. Fortunately, I recorded an audio version of this too, which will be probably available to download if somebody wants to, through Spotify or your favorite podcast. I think these are the ones that are important, but the ones that I'm reluctant to upload because I feel like I tend to ramble while I'm at the same time talking about being a man. Well, look, I'm going by my own perspective of things. I think that we have to follow our passions, but we also have to work. We have to find a way to make money. As a vendor right now, an herb vendor, it's hard because I'm not able to obtain the very extremely best product I used to get in the past with Kratom. Things like that kind of make me wary. Honesty is the point. I'm honest and I can never fool people because I would never want to. If I were to lie, I would feel guilty. My two youngest kids, one of them was accusing the other one of cheating. They're 8 and 11. And the other one was denying they were cheating. And I said, look, let me just tell you this. I don't care if you're cheating, who's cheating, or whether you can prove it, because you can't. If you're playing, only thing I'm going to tell you as a man growing up is that I never cheat on a game, and I am always a good sport when I lose. That is the most important thing about playing games. Hands down. We all know this. And it's something I keep pushing to them. This goes not just for board games, obviously. This goes for everything in life. People who can't handle losing are the same people that can't handle being wrong. I mean, just look at what's going on with the President of the United States. To even bring that in here, I think it is important. I had someone say the other day, you shouldn't bring the politics into things. I've heard this a million times. But someone else who said, I've held back from talking about politics for months, but I feel like I have to now because I see things that are ridiculous and they coincide with what I'm talking about. And I didn't intend to bring this up because this is all off the cuff here. But yes, as of today, which I hate dating things, it's 2020, December 19th. The President of the United States is still in denial a month later that he lost the election and really thinks that he's going to overturn the election results. Even talking about, say, bringing in the military, things like that. The absurdity of it, to me, is half of the people out there, or at least a large portion of the people out there, believe that what he's doing is something that's a manly thing, right? But the people that I grew up with and that I've talked with in life cringe and look at it as the least manly thing you can do is to not concede to an election which is obviously you lost. I mean, there's no way around it. I mean, in 2021, Joe Biden will take over. I'm not a Biden fan either, but that's what it is. I think that screaming at other people through Twitter, just spending all your time with vitriol like that is actually a very weak thing. It makes a person seem unmanly to me. And the only reason I bring this up is to say that I'm fascinated with the fact that others think the opposite. And if you look through history, the tyrants and the ones who screamed the most end up being the ones that are the most cringeworthy down the line. We all know the soft-spoken man is the one who always seems the coolest. But sometimes people are so soft-spoken they don't say anything at all. I hope that makes sense. A lot of guys are the soft, calm, cool, collected type, but they really don't have a lot to say. I've seen this before. Maybe I'm one of them. I don't know, you tell me. Anyhow, this video's gotten way too long. I've made 2 of these today, so I suppose I'll talk to you all next time. Thanks for coming along. If this is audio or video, I appreciate you listening, and I'll talk to you all soon. Be well. I have a live podcast coming tomorrow, or a live cast coming tomorrow night on YouTube. So I have a live cast planned for 7:19 p.m. on 12/20/2020, which is tomorrow. Assuming I upload this on 12/19, and tell you all that. So you can check that out. And as always, thank you to my patrons. Thank you to my friends and family. Thank you to everybody. It's fucking awesome to talk about these things. I feel like, there have been moments where I've thought this channel I should not have made such long videos. I shouldn't have, and then other times it's like I should have monetized, or I should have done this or that. Maybe I could have talked about more cool, controversial subjects and then made the channel into a living. Because when you're broke, you think about that shit. And then you think, well, no. I look at the comment sections on the rest of YouTube and it's disgusting. Like, I feel bad for creators who really have good content, but they're so popular that it's just full of just drivel. One-liners and insults and people attacking each other. It's disgusting, So, on a final note, a man never picks on people who are less fortunate, ever. Being a real man means helping people out. That's my opinion, and I stand by it. Peace out. Talk to you next time. Be well. Happy holidays, and I'll talk to you soon.